Good morning and welcome to the Return Homestead. My name is Mike and my wife Marty and I homestead 50 acres in southeastern Kentucky. Today we're going to do something about this corner of the barn. May seem like a small area to focus on, but as you can see, it's quite a mess. So the area in question inside of the barn is actually underneath this platform and then actually out into the barn proper here underneath the hayloft. You can see the moisture that's already come in just from the rain we've had in the last few days. This is extremely muddy and soupy up in here. The water continues all the way through this side of the barn. But for right now, we just want to stop this water from getting into the barn. The biggest problem is that the downspout is right on the outside of this corner. And the water gets dropped right there at the corner of the barn. Well, all of the land is sloped from this point, catty corner across the barn. In fact, even through the barn, the floor is not level. And the water runs right to the middle of the barn. And then it runs across into the middle, hits the concrete, and heads on out the man door on the right. So the real story about the cleanup on this corner of the barn begins up here in the garden. You can see that most of the garden, including the sunflowers and corn and the blueberries, are all over my head here. So that's more of a elevation change than it might appear on camera. So all of this hill is slanting down toward the barn and then even through the barn. So even the floor in the barn is not level, and it all heads in that general direction. But the water does run through there. So the water comes off of this massive roof into the gutter, and there's downspouts at each corner. The water simply comes straight down and is dropped off right here in this great big pile of fencing. We used a lot of this for trellising material. We use it to build cages to put around fruit trees. So the fencing has a lot of good, useful purposes, but it's not very useful as it is now. Just stacked up here in the corner. I need to get this into the barn where it's out of the way. It has a place where it can be stored and sorted. And that needs to go underneath that hayloft where all the mud is. I don't want to put this fencing in the mud. So we need to kill two birds with one stone here. We need to get this fencing moved into the barn, and we also need to correct the problem with the water here on this corner. So I think we're going to get started by making some room in the barn. See if we can't get this fencing cleared out of here. And like most things on the homestead, it's not just about working on that corner of the barn. There's lots of other work that needs to be done as well. Cleaning up this little area here where we had wood stored. Something else that needs to get done. And to protect the fencing in that wet area of the barn until it can dry out. Got these worn out old pallets that we had the wood stacked on. These pallets will come in handy just to get the fencing up off of that wet ground. That will eventually dry out if we stop the water from coming in, but in the meantime this will help protect the fencing. Fairly decent fence post. We want to get it up in the barn where it can dry out nicely. Yes, I know it's just poplar, soft wood. It wouldn't last more than 2 or 3 years as a fence post. But when you have no fence posts, it's a very handy thing to have. And then since we've got the truck out and it's down the hill and we're hauling things up top, we want to get this piece of cabinetry moved into Marti's studio. She's needing someplace to set her pallets down while she's painting. And we don't have any other good use for this little piece of excess cabinetry that we pulled out of the mobile. It'll be a good place for it. So we're going to get that moved up while we're moving all these pallets. It's not much of a cabinet, I'll give you that. But it will function to hold Marti's pallet. Gives her a little bit of counter space. That's what she's needing. And then there's some shelf space down below, which she could also use. So she's going to get this cleaned up while I get those pallets moved up into the barn. And then we'll move this into her studio. And yeah, this may not look like much, but all it's got to do is keep the fencing up out of the mud. And I think it'll accomplish that. So let's get this fencing out of our way. But first, let's head back down below and see if Marti's got that countertop ready to go.
I'm not going to be able to go down like that.
Okay.
Huh?
I got it.
You got it?
Yeah. Not that heavy. We'll wait. Point it in the general direction.
Yeah, a panel would look better.
It'll hold together better if we get a panel on it. But for now, you can see if that's definitely going to cut it for you.
It will.
Let's see.
I'm working. Set my pallet down there. Good to go.
Perfect.
Yeah. Plus, I can store my paints and whatnot. Sweet. All right.
Wow, you're right. That one is pretty intricate.
It is.
It's really starting to come together, though.
It's a challenge.
Cool.
Watch for snakes.
Yes, ma'am. Every time I walk in here, watching for snakes. Some of this is going to be fun to dig out.
No. This area is kind of a hot mess. It's been a dumping ground for some time. What we're going to do is clean this all up, and we'll probably put a decorative tree here. To show you how fast tulip poplars grow, that was maybe 2-3 feet at the most last year. It's taller than Mike. He's 6 foot now. So if you want a fast growing tree, there you go. Now the good news is all the ruminant animals love them.
And just like that, we got all the fencing out of the way. Sorry about that. The camera actually went dead. It was too hot out here. It overheated. But we got everything cleaned up, and this is what we're left with. I'm not sure what this little platform was intended for, but it just needs to come out of there. It shouldn't be up along the side of the barn in the first place. Here's our downspout. Where it's coming out into the yard, it just dumps right back up inside the barn, and we need to move that water. It's got to go across this little bit of a rise and then over here to this ditch, at which point it would go down towards the other house.
And just like that, we've got a new drainage system in for the barn. I really need to see the water coming off of this corner, not going into the barn. And the only way I could see that happening was to get it away from the barn and move it over here to this ditch where the water is already going downhill, so we can finally get it out of the area. This little piece of French drain definitely came in handy. This was just a scrap that was laying on the property, and it wasn't quite long enough. We did have to do a little bit of a repair here. So we had to join on a small section in order to make it to the very end of the ditch here. And we've still got to get some material to pack this with. We do have some non-woven cloth that will wrap around this, but we also want to get some sand underneath it and then pour sand and gravel all around it so that we get good drainage down to the French drain. That's going to allow all the water to get into the French drain, and that's going to push it over here to the ditch where it can finally get on downhill. That was a lot of work on a very hot day. We do appreciate you joining us here on the Return Homestead today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please take a moment to go ahead and do so. While you've got that window open, if you can hit that thumbs up button, that'll really help us out. That'll make sure the algorithm knows you enjoyed the video, and they'll share it out with more people. We'll see you next time.